Hello and welcome to the Piano Library. I'm going to share with you today the books that I have been reading recently. This is not going to be an easy, busy video, and it'll be hard topics. So I'm warning you, and it's totally fine if you need to turn it off and skip this one. But first, when I finished reading Truman, I wanted something light because that was a big book with so much information. And so I picked up this book by Lori Wick because I enjoyed the previous one that I read so much. But this one is a historical romance, part of the series. And I don't think I do well with historical romances. So anyway, I didn't get very far, but that one was a DNF. That was the easy decision. But the next two books that I picked up, they were not easy. The first one I picked off of the Piano Man's book pile that he was reading, In Order to Live. And I was thinking it would be very similar to The Red Scarf Girl, which was the story of a Chinese girl, her life growing up shortly after Mao took over China, and all of the changes and stuff that her family faced, and the trials and tribulations, and her eventual escape. This one, it did have some similarities, but it was much more horrific. Um, it starts off in her childhood. It explains her childhood. Her parents were able to raise enough money that they were well fed and stuff for a while. once once communism fell, once Russia fell, they stopped giving money to Korea, money and food and support. People, a lot of them starved. A lot of them had to find illegal ways of making money to get food to um, support their families. And her family was no different. They probably started a little bit sooner in the black market than everybody else did, but they were doing okay. And there was a period of time where both of her parents had to leave her and her sister alone for weeks at a time in the middle of winter without electricity most of the time and with hardly any food. I was so upset with her mother, especially at one point. But at the same time, who knows what you would do in the same situation. Um, but it was hard. And then when she was 13 years old, her and her sister decided that they wanted to escape and cross the river to China. And so the sister left first, and while she was in the hospital having surgery, and that was a horror show in itself because they didn't have what we know to be medical services. Yeah, so at 13 years old, her mother went with her. They escaped, only to find themselves um, as human trafficking victims, and all of the things that go with that. So, a third of this book, a good third, is while she's 13, while they're living in China, and her experiences. And at that point, she started making all the decisions, and her mother just went along with what she did, and she tried to protect her as much as possible. And then it turned around that this girl started protecting her mother as much as possible, but they eventually got out of there. And then the last portion is learning to live in a society where you know nothing, because they were taught that everything outside of North Korea was bad and evil, and all the propaganda you could think of. Um, yeah, so it was a huge shock and change to them. But this girl, she went from, they tested her and she was about a second grade level in school. And um, within 2 years, she was entering college, um, and doing amazingly and becoming a world speaker against trafficking, etc., etc. So, yes, it was very good, but a horrifying topic. Then, because that wasn't depressing enough, I guess, and I'm losing my voice. Mm, excuse me. Okay, so from there, I went on to the Great Chicago Theater Disaster. This is also a true story. The name of the theater, the name of the theater was the Iroquois Theater. And when it was built, it was highly publicized all across the world, across the country, as the fireproof theater. It was a common thing, way too common, for theaters to catch on fire. And life lost. But the architect of this theater had studied all of the different fires, all of the things, and he was sure that he had a very fireproof, safe theater. Well, his plans were were good, but I'll get to what happened in a minute. But I'll first kind of set the stage. No pun intended. The fire took place on December 30th in 1803, 1903. Sorry. We wouldn't have had electricity then in 1803. Anyway, in 1903, it was the Christmas holidays. It was very festive. There were people in the city from all over just for this theater, which had opened less than 30 days before this disaster took place. And this was a matinee performance. So, as you can imagine, there was a lot of children, a lot of women at this. There was some men, but it was primarily women and children. So, and they wanted to get as much money out of it as possible. So they allowed people to bring chairs and sit in the aisle. There was at least four deep standing room in the back. All the seats, of course, were filled. But because they'd hyped up this theater so much, um, there was pressure on them to open on time from everybody, from the mayor to the owners to everybody in the district, because at the time Chicago wanted to be New York. They wanted to surpass New York in the theater industry. And um, in order to do that, they needed to cut some corners. Yes, disastrous results for that because they did that. And also just practice the things that they did for every performance. They didn't want the riffraff sneaking in, so they locked the doors. So when the fire broke out, all the doors were locked. Almost all the doors were locked. The fire escapes, the doors on the fire escapes were locked. The fire escapes were not finished. Yeah. There were no lights over the doors. That may or may not have helped in this situation, but there were no lights. The architect didn't want to have lights. He had designed some extra decorative doors, which people, of course, tried to open, and they couldn't. Some of the aisles and stairwells came to a meeting place to come out, and there was a stampede of people. So that didn't. Um, there was so many things. Yes. Anyway, over 600 people didn't make it out of that theater that day. And it all took about 10 minutes, between 5 and 10 minutes. Yeah, there was a lot of things, that they cut, and that actually increased the intensity of the fire and the spreading and the horrificness. Yes. So this is a very rare book, I think. It has photographs of some of the victims. It has the coroner's report in it. It has lots of interviews, which this was compiled just months afterward, so it was very raw. Um, anyway, I just wanted to say that if you would like a much less emotional account of what happened, the Chicago Fire Department also has a video on YouTube talking about the Iroquois Theater fire. So, yeah, that's what I've been reading. So, anyway, I've moved on to some happier things. Anyway, thank you so much for sticking with this video. And I'll see you next time with some happier topics. Thank you so much. Goodbye.